The grand halls of the royal palace shimmered under the light of twin suns, their golden rays reflecting off the polished crystal walls. Princess Leora of the Vailian Empire stood silently on the balcony, her silver-blue skin glowing faintly as she gazed at the sprawling city below. Behind her, the soft hum of medical drones filled the air as they completed yet another examination. "It is confirmed, Your Highness," the chief physician said, his voice heavy with regret. "The royal physicians have reached a unanimous decision. You are infertile. The royal bloodline cannot continue through you." Leora's fingers tightened around the railing. The words were not new, she had heard them many times before, but each repetition felt like a blade twisting deeper into her heart. Without an heir, her family's dynasty would end, and the throne would pass to a distant, power-hungry cousin. The empire would fall into chaos. "Leave me," she whispered. The physicians bowed and retreated, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Months passed, and the weight of her failure pressed down on her. Desperate, Leora turned to the stars. If Vailian science could not help her, perhaps another civilization could. Her advisors suggested a radical idea: contact the humans. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, their technology primitive but their biology unusual. There were rumors, whispers really, that human DNA was strangely compatible with other species. Some called it a fluke of evolution. Others called it a miracle. Leora ordered her ship to Earth. When she arrived, she was met by a human scientist named David, a man with warm brown eyes and an easy smile. He worked in a small but respected research facility, studying interspecies genetics. "You want to know if we can help you conceive?" David asked, surprised but not dismissive. "Yes," Leora said, her voice steady despite the hope threatening to break through. "My people have tried everything. If you cannot help me, no one can." David studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Then we'll try." The tests began, endless scans, genetic comparisons, and medical trials. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, Leora felt something she had long forgotten: hope. Then, one day, David entered her chamber with a smile brighter than the twin suns of her home. "Princess," he said softly, "you're going to have a child." Leora's breath caught in her throat. The impossible had happened. And now, the empire would never be the same. The news should have brought joy. It should have been a moment of triumph, a victory against fate itself. But as Princess Leora stood in the quiet medical chamber of the human research facility, her hands trembling over her abdomen, all she felt was fear. An heir. A living heir. The implications were too vast to grasp. The royal physicians of Vailia had declared her barren. What would they say now? What would the High Council do when they learned that a human, a species barely known to the galaxy, had succeeded where their greatest scientists had failed? David, ever observant, noticed the tension in her stance. "You don't seem happy," he said carefully. Leora exhaled slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "This changes everything. My people, they will not accept this easily." David frowned. "But it's what you wanted, isn't it? An heir?" "Yes," she admitted. "But not like this." The Vailian Empire was ancient, proud, and rigid in its traditions. A half-human heir would be seen as an abomination by some, a political weapon by others. The moment this news reached her homeworld, the delicate balance of power would shatter. She needed time. Time to think, to plan. "We must keep this secret," she said at last, turning to David with urgency in her violet eyes. "No one outside this facility can know." "Not yet." David hesitated. He was a scientist, not a politician, but he understood danger when he saw it. "For how long?" "Until the child is born," Leora said. "Until I can present them to the Empire as a fait accompli. Once there is a living heir, the court will have no choice but to accept it." David nodded slowly. "Then we'll keep it quiet." But you'll need to stay here, on Earth, for the duration of the pregnancy. Vailian medical scans might detect something your people aren't ready to see. Leora agreed. Weeks passed in quiet secrecy. Leora remained hidden within the research facility, her presence known only to a handful of trusted humans. David became her constant companion, monitoring her health, ensuring the child's development was stable. And then, one evening, as Earth's moon cast silver light through the windows, David asked the question that had been burning in his mind. Why did your people declare you infertile? Leora's gaze darkened. Because I am the last pure-blooded descendant of the first dynasty. My line was always meant to rule. But after generations of genetic refinement, our fertility dwindled. The royal physicians believed it was the price of perfection. David leaned forward. And yet, here you are. Yes, she murmured, resting a hand on her stomach. Because humans are imperfect. Your genes are chaotic, adaptable. What my people saw as weakness, your biology saw as opportunity. David smirked. So we're the solution to your over-engineered DNA? Leora almost smiled. It seems so. But their peace was short-lived. A transmission arrived, an encrypted message from Vailia. Leora's heart pounded as she decoded it. Princess, you are summoned. The High Council has begun questioning your absence. If you do not return within the cycle, they will declare you unfit and name your cousin as heir. Leora's fingers clenched. She had run out of time. David, reading the message over her shoulder, let out a slow breath. What now? Now, she had a choice. Return home and face the storm, or stay in hiding and lose her throne. Leora lifted her chin. We go to Vailia. The journey back to Vailia was tense. Princess Leora stood at the viewport of her sleek royal vessel, watching the stars streak by in hyperspace. Her hands rested protectively over her still flat stomach, where the future of her dynasty now grew. David stood beside her, his human frame looking out of place among the elegant Vailian architecture of the ship. You sure about this? He asked quietly. We could still turn back. Leora shook her head. If I do not return now, my cousin will seize the throne. And if that happens, neither I nor my child will be safe. David exhaled. Then we'll need a plan. You can't just walk in and announce you're pregnant, not after they declared you infertile. A slow, calculating smile touched Leora's lips. No. But I can let them discover it. The royal palace loomed before them, its towering crystalline spires glinting under the twin suns. As Leora stepped onto the landing platform, flanked by her guards, the High Council's envoys were already waiting. Princess Leora, greeted Counselor Vayan, his voice smooth but his golden eyes sharp. Your absence has been concerning. Leora inclined her head, every inch the composed royal. My health required specialized care. I trust the Empire endured in my absence. Vayan's gaze flickered to David, who stood slightly behind her. And this is? My personal physician, Leora said smoothly. Human medical expertise has proven unexpectedly useful. The counselor's expression darkened, but he said nothing further. Days passed in a delicate dance. Leora resumed her duties, careful to avoid the royal physicians. David, posing as her human advisor, stayed close, monitoring her condition. But secrets in the Vailian court had a way of unraveling. It happened during a state banquet. Leora had just lifted a goblet of shimmering nectar to her lips when a sudden wave of nausea struck. She barely had time to excuse herself before retreating to a private chamber, David at her heels. You all right? He asked, voice low. She took a steadying breath. The child is strong. Too strong. David frowned. We knew this would happen eventually. But if the court finds out like this. The door slid open. Counselor Vayan stood there, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the royal physician, her scanner still glowing from an unauthorized scan. "Princess," Vayan said slowly, "care to explain why our instruments detect a living heir within you?" The game was up. Leora straightened, her voice icy. The royal physicians were mistaken. Clearly. Vayan's eyes flickered to David. Or perhaps, outside interference has occurred. A dangerous silence fell. Then. "Does it matter?" Leora challenged. "The Empire has its heir. That is all that should concern you." Vayan smiled thinly. "Oh, it concerns us greatly, Princess. Greatly." He turned and left, the unspoken threat hanging in the air. David let out a slow breath. That could have gone better. Leora's hand settled over her stomach. No. But the battle was always coming. And now, it had begun. The royal court erupted in chaos. Word spread like plasma fire through the palace halls: the infertile princess was with child. Worse, the heir carried traces of human DNA. Traditionalists recoiled in horror. Reformers whispered of opportunity. And Leora's cousin, Lord Cayley's, saw only a threat to his ambitions. David paced the length of Leora's private chambers, his boots silent against the iridescent floor. They're going to challenge the legitimacy of the child. Leora stood motionless by the arched window, watching the distant spires of the capital. They will try. A knock at the door. Her most trusted guard entered, his armored fist pressed to his chest in salute. "Your Highness, the High Council demands your presence. They've invoked the blood right protocol." David's brow furrowed. Translation? Leora's fingers tightened around the window's edge. "They mean to test whether the child is truly of royal blood." The Chamber of Echoes lived up to its name. Every footstep, every breath bounced off the ancient obsidian walls as Leora entered the circular arena where her ancestors had settled dynastic disputes for millennia. The High Council sat in tiered seats above, their faces illuminated by the chamber's floating bioluminescent orbs. Councillor Vayan rose. "Princess Leora, by the authority of the Imperial Charter, you will submit to genetic verification." At the chamber's center stood the blood mirror, a relic capable of revealing the purity of royal lineage. Leora had seen it used only once before, when her uncle's bastard child had been exposed and exiled. David moved to follow her, but two guards crossed their energy pikes. "Only royal blood may approach." Leora gave him a barely perceptible nod before stepping forward alone. The mirror's surface swirled like mercury as she pressed her palm against it. A needle-thin tendril emerged, pricking her finger. Across the chamber, holographic strands of DNA materialized, her own glowing silver, the child's shimmering with unexpected gold strands among the blue. Murmurs became shouts. "Human contamination," spat an elder counselor. Lord Cayley's descended from the shadows, his crimson robes flowing. "This half-breed cannot inherit the ruby throne." Leora's voice cut through the din. "The blood mirror confirms what matters. This child carries the first dynasty's markers. The rest is irrelevant." Cayley smiled, all sharp teeth. "Is it? Your human pet's tainted blood makes this heir a security risk. What if their biology makes them susceptible to control? To rebellion?" David's voice rang out unexpectedly. "Or what if it makes them stronger than your inbred royals have been in centuries?" The chamber fell deathly silent. Cayley's eyes burned with fury. "Seize the human." Energy cuffs snapped around David's wrists before he could react. Leora moved to intervene, but four guards blocked her path. Vayan raised his hands. "The human will be detained pending investigation. As for the princess, she will remain under guard in the North Spire until the child's birth. House arrest. A gilded cage." As they led David away, his last look wasn't fear, it was a promise. "I'll fix this." Leora clutched her stomach as the reality set in. She'd won the battle of bloodlines. Now she had to win the war for her child's future. The North Spire was beautiful, and it was a prison. Leora paced the sun-drenched solarium, her bare feet whispering across the heated crystal floors. Through the curved windows, she could see the entirety of the capital, the ruby throne's distant glow, the bustling spaceports, the military drills and the training arenas. All of it just out of reach. A chime at the door. Enter. Her elderly handmaiden, Mira, shuffled in with a tray of nutrient-rich delicacies. The woman had served 3 generations of royals, her loyalty unquestionable. "You must eat, Your Radiance," Mira murmured, setting the tray down. "The heir needs strength." Leora eyed the shimmering fruits, genetically perfected, sterile, just like her people preferred everything. She pushed the tray aside. "Any word from the human?" Myra's wrinkled face tightened. "The High Council has him in the Scholar's Tower. They're studying him." A cold fury settled in Leora's bones. The Scholar's Tower was no place for prisoners. Its gleaming white halls housed the Empire's greatest minds, xenobiologists, geneticists, weapons developers. Now, they had a new specimen to examine. David sat shirtless in an examination chair, his skin dotted with sensor nodes as a team of Vailian scientists murmured over their holographic displays. "Fascinating synaptic plasticity," one noted. "Primitive but remarkably adaptable DNA," said another. The lead researcher, a severe woman with silvered eyes, leaned close. "Tell me, human, did you know your unique genetics would bond with royal blood?" David smirked. "Lady, I'm a xenobiologist from Nebraska. Until 6 months ago, I thought Vailian was a brand of probiotic yogurt." A door hissed open. Lord Cayley's entered, his crimson robes replaced by a scientist's white coat. "A disguise." "Enough games," Cayley said, dismissing the others with a wave. When they were alone, he activated a privacy field. "Here's what will happen. You'll confess to genetic tampering. That the child isn't truly the princess's." David barked a laugh. "Yeah, that'll go over great, Goops, I magically impregnated your royal with science." Cayley's backhanded him. The crack echoed off the walls. "You misunderstand," Cayley said calmly, wiping his hand on his coat. "This isn't a negotiation. The moment that half-breed is born, it will be terminated. The only question is whether you die screaming in a cell, or walk free." David spat blood on the pristine floor. "Let's get one thing straight. That half-breed is gonna outlive you. And when it does, I hope it has your ugly face mounted on its nursery wall." Cayley's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see." Back in the spire, Leora felt the first kick. A flutter, faint but undeniable. Life asserting itself. She pressed a hand to her stomach, reaching for the one advantage she still had, her connection to the palace's ancient systems. With a voice command, hidden panels in her chambers slid open, revealing a holographic console. Forbidden tech, smuggled in by loyalists. A flick of her fingers, and security feeds appeared. The Scholar's Tower. The throne room. The hangars. And there, David, being marched toward a detention shuttle. Leora's fingers flew across the controls. A coded message, sent through back channels to the only allies she had left, the human embassy. Then, a second transmission, to the one person in this palace who might still help her. The screen flickered. A face appeared, weathered but regal. "Mother," Leora breathed. The Dowager Empress's eyes gleamed. "I told you not to trust the High Council." Outside, alarms began to blare. The alarms shrieked through the palace like a living thing. Leora's fingers flew across the holographic console as the Dowager Empress's image flickered. "They've locked down the spire," her mother said, eyes sharp. "Cayley's isn't just after the child, he's purging your supporters as we speak." A feed from the detention hangar flashed on screen. David, struggling against armored guards as they forced him toward a shuttle. Leora's pulse hammered in her throat. They'll dissect him. Use his DNA to manufacture evidence against the heir. Then we move now. The Dowager Empress entered a command off-screen. I've activated the old servant passages. Meet me at the Moon Garden in 5 cycles. The transmission cut out. Leora didn't hesitate. The hidden door behind her bathing chamber slid open with a whisper. Dust swirled in the dim light as she stepped into the narrow passage, a relic from the palace's violent past, when emperors needed escape routes from assassins. Her bare feet were silent on the cold stone as she descended. The walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent moss, casting eerie shadows. Somewhere above, boots pounded as guards searched her chambers. A sudden cramp twisted through her abdomen. Leora bit back a gasp, bracing against the wall. The child kicked violently, as if sensing danger. Not now. She forced herself forward. The Moon Garden should have been empty at this hour. Instead, armored figures waited among the glowing flora, not palace guards, but warriors in unmarked black armor. The Dowager's personal retinue. Her mother stood at the center, a pulse rifle slung across her back like a common mercenary. You're late, the Dowager said, tossing Leora a weapon. Leora caught it awkwardly. I was detained by treason and impending motherhood. A ghost of a smile. The hangar first, then? A warrior handed Leora a cloak. We've disabled the cameras, but Kaylee's has drones sweeping the perimeter. The Dowager checked her rifle. Then we'll need a distraction. As if summoned, an explosion rocked the northern wing. Orange fire lit up the night. Leora whirled. What? Your human allies, her mother said, already moving. Apparently, they take kidnapping their scientists personally. Chaos reigned at the hangar. Human commandos in tactical gear traded fire with Vailian guards, their energy weapons flashing in the smoke-filled air. Leora spotted David near a shuttle, still cuffed but now shielded by 2 human soldiers. Kaylee stood on the landing platform above them, shouting orders. The Dowager didn't hesitate. She fired. The shot went wide as Kaylee's ducked behind cover, but the message was clear. Go, the Dowager shoved Leora toward the humans. Get to their ship. Leora ran, cloak billowing. David's eyes locked onto her, wide with relief, then horror. Behind you. She turned just as a guard lunged. The butt of his energy pike slammed into her ribs. Pain exploded through her side as she fell, her vision swimming. Something warm and wet trickled down her legs. The guard raised his weapon for the killing strike. A gunshot rang out. He crumpled. David stood over her, his cuffs broken, a smoking pistol in hand. Told you I'd fix this, he gasped, hauling her up. Leora clutched her stomach. David, I think. A contraction ripped through her, worse than before. The human medic cursed. Ma'am, you're in labor. Kaylee's laughter echoed across the hangar. Perfect. Let the humans witness their abomination's stillbirth. The Dowager's rifle found his chest. Run, daughter. As the firefight reignited around them, David swept Leora into his arms and sprinted for the human dropship. Somewhere behind them, the Ruby Throne's bells began to toll, the sound of a dynasty ending. Or beginning. The human dropship shuddered as it broke atmosphere, its hull scorched by Vailian plasma fire. Inside the makeshift medbay, Leora gripped the edges of the surgical table as another contraction tore through her. Breathe, Your Highness, the human medic urged, prepping a hypospray. The child's coming fast. David hovered at her side, his hands stained with her blue-tinged blood. Can't you stop the labor? Not without killing them both, the medic snapped. An explosion rocked the ship. Alarms blared as the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. we've got 3 royal fighters on our tail." Leora screamed as her body arched off the table. The world narrowed to pain and the crushing need to push. Somewhere in the chaos, the Dowager Empress's voice cut through. "Hold on, daughter." Then. A final, gut-wrenching push. A cry. Not the weak wail of a half-breed abomination, but a strong, clear sound that rang through the dropship like a bell. The medic lifted the child, a girl with Leora's silver-blue skin but human eyes that burned gold in the dim light. "She's perfect," David whispered. Leora reached trembling hands for her daughter just as the ship lurched violently. The medic stumbled, barely keeping hold of the newborn. "They've locked a tractor beam," the pilot shouted. The viewscreen flickered to life. Kaylee's sneering face filled the display. "Did you truly think you could escape?" The Dowager calmly checked her rifle. "Actually," she said, flipping the safety off, "we were counting on you following." Before Kaylee's could react, the human pilot executed a maneuver no Vailian ship could replicate, a sudden barrel roll that positioned their ventral hatch directly above Kaylee's fighter. The Dowager pulled the release. 2 black-clad warriors dropped through the opening, landing boots first on Kaylee's cockpit. Their magnetic charges detonated a second later, blowing the canopy to shreds. As Kaylee's ship spun out of control, the human medic handed Leora her child with shaking hands. "Your Majesty, what now?" Leora looked down at her daughter, the first Vailian human hybrid, the heir no one had wanted but everyone would now have to accept. She pressed a kiss to the baby's forehead and answered with the certainty of an empress. "Now we go home." Epilogue. The coronation took place at dawn. As the twin suns rose over the ruby throne, Leora stood before the assembled High Council with her daughter in her arms and David at her side. The Dowager's warriors lined the hall, their weapons conspicuously visible. Councillor Vayan swallowed hard as he placed the crown on Leora's head. "Long live Empress Leora I. Long live the heir apparent." He hesitated. "What is her name?" David grinned. "Hope." And as the child's golden eyes met the council's, the Empire knew one truth above all others. Nothing would ever be the same.